for the civilians listening in, learn how to extract information without committing to a personal level of whatever you're doing. So this podcast, right? You don't have to like artist Red, Alex, or Will. You have to. You're here to extract information. So do that. Focus on extracting what you can from said information sources and move on. Like don't delve into these. Like I see all these comments on these GunTuber pages and stuff. They get sucked into the drama of whatever that company's going through or whatever. End of the day, get what you need, extract it, annotate it, notate it, whatever, apply those things to your needs and move the fuck on. That's probably my biggest advice in this whole industry social media thing.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Civilian Principles Podcast. The point of this podcast is to kind of spread information upon the masses that I feel like has been gatekept from the tactical community. Today, we are going to be going over the video this prior week, which was the realistic civilian response loadout. Throughout the course of this video, we'll be hitting topics that were discussed in that video, expanding on certain things, maybe pitching new ideas, and we'll just see wherever it goes. I've got three very, very, very awesome guests in the podcast with me today. The first one is going to be Alex.
What's going on, guys? Sniper background, D-list actor, D-list comedian. Really, just tons of reconnaissance experience, years in different various countries. So, yeah, hopefully I can give somebody something.
All right, hell yeah. The next person is going to be Red.
Hey, I'm Red, certified Redneck, Infantryman, and avid outdoorsman. How y'all doing?
Hell yeah, Red. Good to see you. And then the next person we're going to be going over is the artist.
Hey, I'm the artist for Task Force Stoomer, and I'm the civilian element of this podcast, and I'm excited to get into it and see what we can learn or what's different between the civilian military world.
And I am Will. I am the founder of Civilian Principles, and I've got about a decade worth of desert warfare, shooting competition experience, and tactics all in general. All right, to kick this off, got everyone down. We're going to go over the first topic of the video. Feel free to say whatever you want at any point. But what do you guys realistically see as threats to the U.S.? You guys don't have to say CIA, but whatever you guys have felt is a threat or could be a threat, whether it's foreign or domestic, things that you've seen through the news or Instagram or whatever the case is. What do you guys see? What do you think is more applicable? What do you see happening sooner rather than later? And I'll leave the floor kind of open to that one.
Well, I think right off the bat, you have everyone starting to kind of see the effects of disinformation and overreaction, if you guys know what I mean by that.
Yeah.
100%.
So with that disinformation and that overreaction, now you have, situations built on things that maybe we don't have all the facts, and then you have irrational input from whatever parties, and then now you have emotion involved, and we all know how that goes.
Okay, so from a media standpoint, kind of causing a unrest amongst people. I mean, I think we've all seen it too as the years have gone on, especially the last, I'd say, 8 years, where it's gotten really bad. The explosion of social media mixed with political parties dividing heavily with the last two presidents. And then one guy says one thing, one guy is saying the other, and it really gets bad from there. Artist, what do you kind of think about that?
Yeah, mostly, civil unrest is my biggest concern for sure. Like, we already saw a lot of that in the early 2020s, obviously, right? And I have a greater concern, which is that the civil unrest reaches a peak to where we are susceptible to foreign action. I think that a lot of countries, they want to be the next America, and they're watching America, and I'm worried that we'll get to a point where we're vulnerable enough to where we are dealing with foreign entities. That's my concern.
Yeah, and it's a slow chipping effect, I think. It's
happening for sure.
little.
No, I mean, definitely, like I always love watching, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook, this really patriotic edits that are like, damn, maybe I should re-enlist. But there is also a lot of bad. I think a lot of people see everything online, and they really do believe it, which is wild because you should have a very open view of, hey, this is what I'm seeing and I like, but what's the other side of this? But the other problem with that too, artist, you kind of covered it, was, early 2020s, especially with the beginning of the pandemic and how everything was changing so quick and everyone just wanted an answer. We kept hunting for it. I honestly thought at that point in time, with how wild this country was getting, with, whether it was George Floyd or the BLM movement or the military having to be forced vaccinated, people losing their jobs, I really thought that was going to be the tipping point to civil unrest. I didn't think it would just kind of roll over as it did. And maybe I'm dumb for thinking that. But that was, for me, that was a wild experience, seeing everything on the outside world as like, oh shit, it's falling apart. And then in the military, it's like, hey, you're not going to work, nothing's going on. Like, there was really a disconnect. It kind of felt like a fever dream.
Yeah, I lived I didn't live there. My mom lived somewhere that had a riot that was so bad that they burnt down like a store building, like several blocks down from her. And I remember just being there for my mom, hoping that it wouldn't get worse. And that was the first time in my whole life where I thought something's really wrong is happening. Like, things are going the wrong direction. Was like having to physically worry about my mom in that example. So
yeah, I just got back from I just got back from Afghanistan a couple months later. Now you're looking at the the elections, the pandemic still kind of going on, and then I'm hoping to kind of unwind from that and relax a little bit. But now I'm it's home soil, and I'm getting like selfies and stuff from buddies that are like, hey, I'm on top of my family's business, and they're kitted up, and there's just like they're sending videos of like Molotovs getting thrown. It was upsetting to say the least, but also like an eye opener for one second you're just having a normal day, and then the next second you're defending your family's property.
That was it for me, is how quickly things changed. It went from like a normal day, everything's normal, to a family member begging me to come over because they were scared. And that's what I'm concerned about. And I think that switch is so easily met.
Yeah, for me, it was kind of, like I said before, it's kind of disassociating. Like, I didn't feel like it was the real world because I had a child that was just born a month before it all went downhill. And I remember being in the hospital and seeing something about COVID and how it's shutting down Asia. And I was like, yeah, it's not going to happen. And then, I come back from that, and it was like a week later, the unit was going out to the field, and I was having to bus people out. And all of a sudden it's like, hey, turn it around, we're going under lockdown. And I was like, oh, this is real. Like, this is actually happening. And then watching it, kind of how Alex said, from the buddy side of things, I've had buddies in the National Guard, and a few of them I went to high school with are still in the state I'm from, and like watching their stories online of like, these idiots didn't even give me magazines. Like, how am I supposed to protect myself in this riot? What am I even doing? Like, standing out there with a pro mask that isn't going to do anything, standing out there with an unloaded rifle, and then just having to watch a city burn, and like, you can't do anything. And then, if you're not in an area that's affected by it, you're kind of out of the realm of, like how rich people look down on poor people. Like, I don't have to worry about that. It's kind of the same thing. Like, I'm not there. It's not affecting me. Like, why do I give a shit? But at the same time, it's like, oh fuck, like this is happening all across. And then, through the whole COVID thing, what was it? Was it Seattle or a part of Seattle that shut down, turned into that like no police, no
Chaz
government,
or whatever.
The
Chaz,
yeah.
That was wild. Like, that again, that's every month it was like, I never thought I'd see this happen in my lifetime, and I am. Because the biggest thing before, the biggest thing before that was 9/11, like that all of us kind of watched and experienced, and then that pushed the country into war. And then 20 years later, it's, oh, we're fighting ourselves. What do we do?
Well, I think the dangerous part of all this too is the majority of the nation kind of learned how to like numb through it, or like thug it out, so to speak. So there's all this stuff going on, and a lot of people aren't responsive, if that makes sense. The masses are like, oh, you know, I'm gonna pop on some Fortnite, crack a beer, and it'll all just blow over in the morning, which is completely irresponsible, and we know that. You know, granted, did we, you know, crack some beers and probably play some Xbox during the whole like lockdowns and stuff? Absolutely, but there's still a piece of us, I would say, that was, you know, kind of tuned in to what was going on and reactive and proactive for that matter.
Red, what's your take on kind of this civil unrest? You know, what we've seen the last, I'd say, decade or so.
So there's two main things that stick out in my head. And I think the first one is with this civil unrest, it's just a symptom of a larger issue, which is like lack of knowledge, lack of proper education. I'm not talking about politicized education to one side or the other. History is probably the most important topic you could ever learn about. And like they say, if you don't learn it, you're doomed to repeat it. Everything we're talking about has happened before. It happened just as quickly as it did before. It just happened in other places in a different time. So we don't like to think about it. We don't like to visit it or think that that could happen to us. And that's just kind of hubris on our part. Is obviously, this is America. We don't have to worry about what happened over here. We don't have to wonder how that government fell in 2 weeks to its people because they didn't have food for a week or something like that. And the other thing that really gets me is with the COVID thing, I was working in a hospital and I had family members working in the hospital during the whole thing. And I just remember being told, like, we got this, we're on top of it, we got everything we need. And then they're having you reuse the same N95 mask for a week because they're just so terribly prepared. And it was entirely my bad for not preparing myself for that situation and then being at the mercy of these so-called leaders who were telling me everything was going to be okay. And due to that lack of preparation on my own and family members' parts, a family member got terribly afflicted with the COVID and almost died. And those are from the people who are supposed to be in charge and helping you, but get cut a huge bonus once it's all over. You just really come to terms with the fact that you're by yourself. No one's going to help you.
No, yeah, I mean, absolutely. And, you know, one thing, Red, I've got to say, I was very well spoken. You know, we're on a podcast. You don't have to use such big words. I don't even know what the fuck humorous means. Okay, so that's good. We talked about what we've seen, you know, because it's a lot of there's been a lot of lies that have been told throughout our political system and through, you know, even down to your work. It affected a lot of us, and that didn't even kick off a hey, what are we doing kind of thing, you know? Because I mean, look at, you know, we just celebrated our was it 248th birthday, and you know, that started because the British, those beaver teeth people, decided to raise, you know, a very small tax on our tea, and we were like, absolutely not. And then as time has gone on, we've just kind of gotten used to the abuse, and now it's like, hey, everything's going to get taxed heavily. We're going to give you this stimulus check that's going to fix all your problems. Oh, people are still losing their jobs. People still don't, you know, people are losing houses, cars, all that, and it never kicked it off. And to me, part of me is like, hey, maybe that's a test run, or hey, this really was, you know, a really messed up thing. But I mean, even then, the evidence against our own country was like, hey, we've been paying people to say this happened, or we've been paying people to push a certain agenda, right? And again, nothing happened. So that, to me, that's more of that domestic threat of what's going to happen, what's going to be that catalyst, that sparks, that, you know, where we have in that A24 film Civil War. You know, what is going to take? Is it going to even happen? Are we so used to beatings now that we're just like, yep, the masses they're just ready to take it, and it kind of turns back into a Chaz scenario where a small area of the United States says, fuck this, we're doing our own thing, and the rest of the U.S. is like, that's the stupidest decision you could make. But, you know, like, what do you guys think would have to be that catalyst? Again, I'll open the floor to it, but what do you think would be that push? Would it be a homegrown terrorist incident? Would that be another thing kind of like 9/11? Or are we getting involved in Ukraine, Russia? Like what do you guys think And again, I'll leave it to open to whoever wants to talk first, but what do you guys think would be that thing to push us to the edge?
So with that, just to be funny for a second, I would say the government taking Zims away like they're talking about doing would probably get a couple people up in arms. But in a more serious note, like you mentioned earlier, we fought a war because of a 2% tax. We're currently being taxed 34%, but that wasn't the main reason. The main reason was taxation without representation. We didn't have a voice for the money we were paying in. And I think as time goes on, we're starting to realize we're paying more money than we ever have and have less of a voice than at any time in American history. And I think one day people are going to look up and realize I'm broke. I don't have a house. Can't afford a house. I'm renting at $2,500 a month. I have a car that I could barely afford. Family's hurting, and these people keep cutting themselves bonuses. And I think it'll just be a gradual wear over time because we have a very short memory. Like a tragedy could go down today, and 2 weeks from now, no one will even be thinking about it. So I think it has to be a constant drum in the background that's really going to get people to that edge.
Yeah, and I brought up emotion earlier, and that's exactly why. As people, you start throwing emotion into stuff. It's going to be that slow economic squeeze. I think that is the catalyst for moving forward on this topic, and just my opinion, obviously. But you start losing things, and the inability to care for one's family is normally a huge emotional factor, and people acting irrational. Look at bank robbers, any sort of thieves. Like they do these things because they're trying to acquire things for their own self-worth, their family, whatever it may be, their motive. But yeah, you slow and slowly squeeze the economy, and then you're going to start to see more and more cases of that emotional and irrational decision making.
Yeah, I think we're getting close to that too. Like I'm having people who in my personal life who are not political at all starting to talk up, like, because of the inflation on everything. And like people are starting to freak out. And it's just the beginning of a freak out. And if it continues on the path it's going, I'm concerned about where it goes. Like,
And like what you're saying, artist, is and if you want me to cut this out, I'll blur or bleep out the rest of this and it'll skip, to whatever. But you and I have been talking, and you were the main reason that this channel even started, right? And it's a talk of there's a lot of people that in their life would have never cared about, firearms aside, how to survive, what is going to happen to them if something catastrophic to the United States happens. What do we do? Like, there's a lot of people that don't know these skills that 9 times out of 10 would not have cared. Like, honest to God, would not have cared. And now they're looking at it as like, if these people that either weren't political or just never gave a shit really in the first place are starting to pick up on these trends, I think it is a sign of bad times are on the horizon. And, I don't know if you feel the same way, artist, but like, to me, that's the whole reason behind this channel, is pushing out as much information as we possibly can to the public so everyone is at least well informed, or at least well prepared and can think for themselves when this happens, right? I was talking to you guys offline before, like, I don't really care if this channel gets 100 subscribers or, you get 1 million. I just want people to be able to take what we might talk about and be able to present it to their community and, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, like, because we have a very real domestic threat to the United States, and it's not, a certain entity going through and, whatever. We're doing it to ourselves. We're letting these people that we have elected kind of steamroll through us. They're our personal benefit and what we want as a society is not really the top of the priority in their books, right? They're just getting paid. They're pushing policies, the whole Juul thing, right? If you guys looking at that, and the people that are listening, like, look into why Juul got off the shelves. But there's things that happen that we don't really think about, and we're just like, oh, that just sucks, it got banned. And there's a really big backing behind that. And again, all of this can lead into a very real civil war or civil unrest where you have to choose a side. And, you know, for the military, it's very hard. I think 95% of them would absolutely go, hey, something's going wrong. Yeah, I'm going to still go to my job. You know, there's a security there. And I think a very small amount would be like, this is not the best fit for my family. It's time to go AWOL. And, you know, it's very hard to make that decision because, you know, how do you approach that? Like, hey, if this shit rolls over in a month, I'm fucked. You know, so there's a give and take on that. But yeah, no, I think everyone for the domestic side of things gave really valid points. Again, that I'm hoping people get something from thinking about what they're seeing now. Maybe they're watching this or listening to this and like, I would have never even thought about that. And they start to look for themselves. They start to study. They start to seek knowledge. But before we move on to the next thing, does anyone want to have anything else that they wanted to kind of say?
Just a little story, I guess. So I just got back from Afghanistan, and you know that was what it was. Those experiences were those experiences. But when I came back home, there's this. Every time you come back from a deployment, there's this sense of like, all right, I'm back in America. You're kind of in the safety net, if that makes sense. And the pandemic was going on, the elections were going on, all the riots, things like that. And that was the first time. You know, my parents don't really believe in weapons. All right, so just that note. It was the first time in over a decade. I got a text message from my mom that said, there's people coming up and down the streets. There's, you know, gunshots, there's fire, you know, they're starting fires. We don't own a gun. What do we do? And that's kind of when it hit me that our country, it just overnight, you're put in a situation where now you have family members hitting you up, and that, you know, they weren't proactive with their choices and things that they have or things that they own, i.e. firearms, things like that, medical. And that's kind of when it hit me that you know, every single person in my family needs to have an awareness or a sense of purpose when those things happen. So purpose of this channel, awesome. I can get behind it. So yeah, on that we can move forward.
And before, if anyone else has something to say really quick, again, you know, we all know each other to a certain extent, and I really do appreciate you guys coming on this and helping with the experience of it, because I have a set amount of here's what I've done, here's what's applicable, here's what I can help with. But, you know, talking to you guys with the last few weeks on how we want to do this and who's going to be involved and all that sort of stuff, like, I'm very glad that we even got to this point, because there was a part of me that didn't think that I'd make it to the first video. Just because there's that doubt of like, should I do it? Is anyone gonna give a shit? But the artist really was like, it doesn't matter. You know, this isn't going to be a living, which we've discussed a lot about. Like, you know, we're not out here to do this for profit, but people don't know things and people need to know these things, right? And I'm going to shamelessly plug this here for a second. If you guys that are listening, if you go into the bio of the YouTube channel, and I'll even put it in the description here, there is a Google Drive with, I'd say, 50 different books on all sorts of information. There is how to counterinsurgency, how to fight counterinsurgency. There is reconnaissance. There is patrols. There is a whole thing on tactics, desert operations, jungle operations. I put the mountain warfare, TM and FM in there. I put the jungle school in there. There's a lot of stuff that you guys can just go into. Now, don't get me wrong. These aren't page turners, right? You're not going to sit here and it's like, you know, whatever these girls are on Book Talk where they're just reading, you know, paper porn. But there's a lot of good stuff in there that shows you, hey, here's how you conduct X, Y, and Z battle drill or tactic. Or, you know, you go into the survivability manual, which is 600 pages long. And there is a lot of how to build a shelter, how to find food, how to find water in certain areas. There's a lot of different things like that. So if you guys want, go in there, download those. Those are all released for the public by the DoD. The first page you'll see is it's for public consumption. There is no limit to how many of these can be released. So it's all open for you guys. Go ahead, download that. If you want to print it off, it's going to be a lot, but you know, at the end of the day, just be better prepared. But okay, sorry, let me get off my pedestal here. Again, thank you guys for being here. But anyone else have anything to say before we go into the next side of this?
Nope, go ahead. Go ahead, artist.
I just wanted to say I agree. The same thing he said. It was my personal family hitting that what do I do moment that made me really consider that Like I've thought for a long time things were like not going great, but it was that where a family member reached out to me specifically, and I was the only person they could call on that made me really realize like it is so fast. Like the degradation of society is so quick. It's so instantaneous. You can't imagine it. And yeah, that's why I've gotten a bigger concern as a civilian. And why I'm excited to be on this podcast and learn from you guys and whatnot.
Yep, normalize it. It's seen as like, I guess, uncommon right now. I think the social media does a pretty good job of suppressing like how much training is actually being done by the civilian side, and people are just patriots in general. I know it sounds like super boomerish, like patriots or whatever, but that's a real thing. Like guys are out there. I mean, in fact, tonight I turned down an opportunity to go do some low light work. There's some guys that are not military. They wanted help with patrolling and things like that. They're out right now, getting their zeros and working with nods. And I think it's awesome. It needs to be normalized, and everyone should have access to facilitating those things.
If I may, I want to say one thing before we switch to the next topic. And it's based on what you just said, which is people don't consider this, and we as a civilian populace need to take it more seriously. We are a Sparta civilization in the history books. It may not, we don't feel that right now. And it's like you said, social media does a lot to downplay it. But it's like in a future history book, we will be looked at as a warfare nation. And I think that there is a calling to that people should accept. I think that you should be capable as a civilian. There's so many reasons, dude. Invasion, civil unrest, the list goes on. Bizarre apocalypse no one expected. Like, who knows? But I think, like, just because you're a civilian, and it's why I think this podcast and having the civilian element, which is me on it, is a really good idea, is that you're not military. It doesn't mean that you can't pick up that warrior part of you, dude. You don't have to just be like, it's like the warrior in a garden, like, that idea or principle. You should be the warrior. It doesn't matter what you do in your real life, like as a civilian, you should be capable.
Yep. Your safety should never be in somebody else's hands. Like never turn and look to them and be like, "This is your responsibility." That's your responsibility. Every single one of us, it's our responsibility to take ownership of the safety of our well-being, our family's well-being, and then our community's well-being.
To that extent, like you always hear people, though, especially when they're attacking you for owning guns, they're like, "Why do you need a gun? You could just call the police." I know, at least where I used to live, if I called the police, it would take 2 hours for them to respond to my address. And I don't know about you, but 2 hours is a hell of a long time, right? Like 2 minutes is a long time in a situation like that. So I mean, I always grew up with that mentality, like there isn't going to be anyone that can help you. You have to help yourself. And now we're seeing everything's going wrong at once. So the police are stretched thin. They're not going to make it to you in the time frame you want them to make it to you.
And all it takes is one significant event to tie up most of a department, and people don't consider that.
100%.
Anyone watching this, there is a Discord channel that I'll also post a link to that'll have things like firearms topics, survival, global news, United States related, all that stuff. So you guys can put your stuff in there, what you guys are seeing that's going on. You might be sitting in Kentucky, but you have a cousin who's in Russia right now, and you might be the first person to catch a glimpse of a counterattack, and you go throw it on there, and people can see that a lot quicker than what they'd see in the news. The news realistically is taking one hour to 48 hours to respond to anything.
Yep. I mean, just take a look at the world right now. We've already been kind of like shown what manipulation looks like with election season. You have the power vacuum with the globe going on right now, and then the suppression of information, things like that. So just all things to consider moving forward. Okay,
cool. All right. So now that we got off of that harsh topic, I'd say at the least, we're going to move into the good and bad, right? Because again, the whole point of this is kind of talking about what was pushed out in the video on Thursday. So we kind of talked about the possible threats to the United States and what we're seeing, right? And so the next thing that was talked about and discussed was the good and bad and or however you want to put it, the realistic and unrealistic side of what's being pushed on YouTube with certain, I don't know if you want to call them influencers or gun tubers, that you see and you're like, hey, actually that's a really good idea, or I like that kit they might be pushing, right? Because there are shills that are getting paid by, I want to say they're God, what is that? Grantham just left it.
Oh yeah, like his little. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they run, whatever and it's a business. They can do what they want. We're a free country, but there are products that are being pushed and shilled on, and there are people that are trying to push. Hey, this is actually more realistic. I have experience in this. This is what I've worked on. Versus, here's this chest rig holds one magazine and one mint jewel on it, and that's all you need. So we can go down the line, and I'll start with artist because I believe you've probably seen a lot more of it on your end of what you do for a living and all that stuff. While the other three of us, we're consumers, and we do parts of this for a job, but you get to see a lot of it all the time and seeing what is making the industry what it is. So what do you think is either people are pushing out on YouTube that's unrealistic or realistic, or the good and bad of what you're seeing on there when it comes to kit in specific?
Yeah, I'm not going to get specific on any channels, but the thing that I notice a lot, which I find detrimental and why I'm excited about this podcast, is that a lot of people speak as though it's 100% doctrine. This is the only way something can happen. And that's something we're going to get more into in the podcast in the future and discussion and whatnot. But it's like, I don't think it's that simple. Like, so many people are like, you have to do it this way. This is the thing. This is the kit you need. This is like the gun. This is exactly what you need on your kit. There's so many videos of that where they're like, you need this. You need this. I know the right way. And it's all over the spectrum. And it's always so authoritarian where it's like, I know better than you. You're stupid. And I don't think that's helpful to a person who's just trying to get into it or trying to progress or learn, to hear someone say this is the only way. Because then that builds in your mind like, I should ignore other people's ways of doing things. I just saw a video where a person said, if you're patrolling your own property, you only need one magazine for your rifle, and that's it. And it's like,
good luck, pal.
Fuck.
They were talking about like a conflict event, like where you would need to patrol your property, not like, it's not like, oh, I'm just walking my property today.
Yeah.
And I was just like, and that guy was like, he was committed. He was like, Navy SEALs are wrong, bro. Everyone's wrong. I know it's right. And I see a lot of that in the tactical gun community, military community. And it just doesn't make sense, man. Like, you don't know. And it's like, you can portray something as like, this works for me personally. And I think that that's kind of what the podcast is going to try and do. And then we're going to have discussions and figure out what works for certain people, or if there's certain things that make more sense. But yeah, that's like, I don't even think it's channel specific. I think it's just a problem in the industry of being like,
yes,
this is it. This is it. If you don't do it, you're dumb. You're stupid. Like, this is it.
Yeah. Now, before anyone else says anything, I have to pick up on what you said, artist. Are you saying that you are going to be a weekly occurrence on this podcast?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Just wanted to set that out there. But Alex, I know, you and I have had a lot of discussions about this stuff as well. So what is your take on all this? Because you also ran a very well company that it's very funny that I was following you before I even met you. But you also ran it. You were a big part of the community as well, whether you think it or not. But what have you been seeing on it? Well,
and honestly, it's not around anymore because of what I'm about to say. worked with or acquainted with lots of companies in this industry, and when you start to see, I'll say this for anyone that's listening right now, when you're looking at like how credible a page is or whatever like that, if you start to see things like Lamborghinis and giant fucking big titted chicks, like it's a mask for what they lack, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
The more raw the page, the more less flashy, I guess. Yeah, the less flashy a page is, you're probably in the right spot, because they're more focused on getting you the information versus trying to alter your brain into caring about whatever they're fucking telling you. So that's my take on it.
And before we get to Red too as well, for people listening, everyone in this lobby is at one point or another going to reoccur, whether they're here weekly or whether it's once a month. Again, it's everyone has a day job. Everyone's got a life to worry about, so this podcast isn't their number one priority. But where there's a gap, we're going to try to fill that as well, because again, the whole point of this is getting that out there. And one thing I will make that promise right now. And I know artists can back that up, and Alex and Red can as well, is at no point in time is this podcast or any video from the start of this channel and then going to the end of it, whether it's the internet goes out worldwide or I'm smoked by some Ukrainian with friendly fire, but this isn't going to be a shill podcast. This isn't going to be a shilled company. This isn't going to be something that you can pay your way into, right? Like, I love Primary Arms, right? And I'll say that right now, but they've also had insane deals. They've probably put a lot of weapons into people's hands that maybe they couldn't afford it because, whatever situation they're in, but because of their deals, they had that. And I'll say the same thing with Palmetto State too, right? Palmetto State is really good because you get the weapon and you immediately have to become an armorer and do your own QC on it. But, I don't know where else you can buy a rifle for $400. And I love that for them, because that's getting a rifle into every hand in America, and it's so affordable. It might be a 5 MOA rifle, but that's something that's better than you having nothing and just really defending on like your Colt 1911. But with this channel going forward and throughout all time, and you guys can, if we ever start to turn that way, which I know we won't, but if we ever do, like, tag this video on whatever post you see and be like, hey motherfucker, like, you are doing exactly what you said you wouldn't. But because at the end of the day, we want to help you guys. And
well, I feel like at the end of the day too, like, a shameless plug is okay. Like, if we trust a company enough to talk about it on like a page like this, it's for something, and I think people can genuinely tell when it's just like, oh, hey, this company's awesome just because I said so. And then also the difference between that and I follow this company because I wholeheartedly follow what they teach, and I believe in it. There's a huge difference in that.
No, absolutely. And with what with what the artist said too, like, I also, with having a thing that makes me want to be the best that I can, a very competitive mindset, right? And knowing I'll never be the best, but always striving for that, I think helps for everyone. But I take in a lot of YouTube because, one, it's just a book that someone is doing, right? I can watch that. I learn from physical or visual. But having that, I've also seen a lot of people that are, hey, I was a SEAL for 3 years and my 5 niche experiences are what you should base your entire preparedness off of. And I think that is the absolute wrong thing to do. And I wish more people would understand that, right? And I get it. They have a business to do, and that's their whole, that's what they kind of founded themselves on, and whatever. But I do believe that there needs to be a point where it's like, hey, I had this niche experience. Let me tell you about it and what worked for me in that point. It shouldn't be, this is what you need to do. And if you're not listening or buying this product that I'm pushing on you, you're a fucking idiot and unsubscribe. I think it should be like, this is what happened to me. This is what worked. This is what saved my life. If you want to do that, go ahead. If this got you thinking, great. And if you think I'm an idiot, that by all means, that's your opinion and you are absolutely entitled to it. But yeah, that's a big problem. But sorry to cut you off. It's either Alex or Red that wanted to talk or still need to go.
If you don't chew Big Red, then fuck you.
Yeah, fuck you.
All right, so I'll hit on what Artist and Alex said real fast, and I'll go into my own side of things. Like what Artist was saying, it's my way or the highway that you see in the YouTube videos and all that stuff. I don't think that's just to the YouTube videos, right? Like you're gonna see that in real life, and it's way harder to tell someone you know and trust in real life, hey, sorry, fuck you, I'm not gonna listen to you. This is not working for me, than it is to tell a YouTube video, hey, not my thing. And a little story about that, just getting off track for a second, is I used to get made fun of because when I would go hunting, I'd bring a pistol with me along with my hunting rifle. And my buddy, his grandfather was giving me hell, and he was like, same exact way. He's like, I don't need a pistol, I'll just use the rifle. A month later, a bobcat got into the tree stand with him, and he came over covered in bandages. So, I mean, sure, yeah, you can listen to the people in your life, or you can find what works for you. And then with what Alex was saying is I've found that the companies that have good, really, really good products don't have to spend near as much on advertising because they know you're going to come back because that shit worked. And I have companies that I go back to over and over again because I've used them for years and they make my life easier. The whole point of your kit is to make your life easier. And if it's not doing that, then you shouldn't have it on there. You just got to look at what works for the people who work.
And for the civilians too, not to cut you off real quick, but just
no, go for it.
To notate, like for the civilians listening in, learn how to extract information without committing to a personal level of whatever you're doing. So this podcast, right? You don't have to like Artist, Red, Alex, or Will. You have to. You're here to extract information, so do that. Focus on extracting what you can from said information sources and move on. Like don't delve into these. Like I see all these comments on these GunTuber pages and stuff. They get sucked into the drama of whatever that company's going through or whatever. You know, end of the day, get what you need, extract it, annotate it, notate, whatever, apply those things to your needs and move the fuck on. That's probably my biggest advice in this whole industry social media thing.
I'm gonna say right there that what you just said, that's definitely gonna be the starting intro, the little teaser at the beginning of this podcast. I think that was very well said, and I think that was very well put together.
If I can say real quick,
absolutely,
based on what Red said, and you guys are all military. I don't want to sound as a military hater, but part of what Red said I think is important, which is like you gotta like and like it's like you gotta take in the information as is and consider it. It can't just be rule. Like I've known military people in the past who wildly exaggerate things, and they say and like you like to think that military people are on the level, but some of them aren't, and some of them exaggerate pretty extremely. And they'll say things that are dumb. Like, if you think of it for just a couple of seconds, you're like, that's dumb. So it's like, it's definitely what Red was saying about, thinking about it more deeply for yourself. It's what Alex was saying about, like, you have to extrapolate the information and consider it. Like, just because someone has a point of authority in some debate or discussion, and like for this instance in the podcast it's military stuff, even us, and that's what Alice was saying, even us, you got to take it and then think about it yourself. You can't just take it as law. None of us are trying to prescribe it as law. You got to consider it. If it makes sense, it makes sense. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Oh, absolutely. I feel like I can speak for everyone here that they would definitely agree to that, because I think, especially with Alex and I being at the rank and position that we're in, we've seen a lot of like people that are still in from 2008 that are kind of on their way out or have mentally checked the fuck out, that don't want to change. They don't want to learn. They think, hey, this is what I grew up on, and this is what you guys should grow up on. And There's that saying from Fallout, which great show. Go watch it on Amazon Prime,
Yes.
or play the game. But war never changes, and that is a fact, right? War happens. War is always the same. There's lives going to be lost for whatever reason. But the one thing that does change is how war is fought, right? You look back at colonial times, right? There's a formation was getting on the line. You'd fire a musket and get back in line and hope to God that, by the time you get back there, the dudes that are about to shoot take that volley of fire for you. And then you fast forward to now, we have night vision. We have ways to light the night without, your naked eye picking that up. We have, especially when it comes to firearms, right? Like, barrels can do insane things with the correct ammunition, and understanding your dope, right? Like that stuff always changes. And if you're, and I had a very good, I'd say the best
for
first
the
sergeant
civilians. What is dope? Sorry, I'm gonna do this every time you say a military term for the civilians.
I will let Alex explain dope because he is the SME when it comes to, which SME is a subject matter expert, but Alex is that.
Dope.
So if you want
data
yeah.
of, or I've heard it both ways, data on or of previous engagement. So it's just like, 300 meters, this is your hold. You write it down. Like that's your dope card.
Cool, yeah. That's one thing is a lot of military channels use military lingo and people don't know what the fuck it means. So I'm the person who's going to ring it in on that, at least for everyone watching.
I will say with like the Sean Ryan show, you did exactly what he does too, and is like, for the people at home, what does that mean? Like we know it, but other people might not. So good on you, artist, for doing that one. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot that is changed with what we do and what we can do. But like I was saying before, I had a really good first sergeant. I'd arguably say the best first sergeant that's alive right now. And one of his things was, the only thing that's been constant in my career is change, and if you can't get with that, you need to fuck off. And you look at automotive companies, right? They're always innovating and engineering and doing all this extra shit. You can kind of hit a standstill with that with rifles. There's only so much you can do before you come out with some niche round. But, constantly changing and adapting. If you're going to tell people, hey, this is what I think you should do, you should also understand what are they wanting this information for? What is their purpose behind it? And then what's going on globally that this could affect them? And if you're stuck in that mindset of like, because I did this in 2001 and I was on some special teams where I could call in a C-130 to drop a Humvee for me so I can go to the nearest, Iraqi Chick-fil-A, you probably should take a step back and realize maybe what you're talking about, while it might be applicable to some, it might be outdated and you kind of need to refresh that stuff.
I can reference to, like, I'm a huge bodybuilding nerd, so Jay Cutler, Ronnie Coleman, some big Olympia pros, and there's like a news conference way back when, and Jay Cutler's going on and on about his accomplishments and this and that and all these things he did. There was a gap between that time and this conference, and Ronnie Coleman looks over and he goes, "Well, what the hell have you done lately?" And like that phrase alone just kind of applies to the military or civilians with accolades, things like that. What have you done lately? That's like a key phrase I always ask myself if I'm ever feeling like I can kick my boots up on the desk a little bit. What have I done lately? Okay, do I rate kicking my boots up on the desk, or do I got to get after something else?
Absolutely. And I think that defines whether civilian or military side, I think that defines a good leader and someone that warrants, hey, I should look up to that person. If you have that mindset of like, am I doing the right thing, or am I teaching the correct stuff? Am I with my guys, or am I with my, coalition or militia, whatever you want to call it? I definitely think that plays hand in hand with that. Before we move on to the next topic, what advice would you have for people? I know kind of some of us have talked about it. What advice would you have for looking for people to take advice from, right? So like, let's say I'm just a random guy that never really gave a shit about any of this the last 20 years of my existence, and I'm starting to get worried about what's going on. what advice would you give them to look for in someone who's giving advice or instructing, or whatever that is, that's giving out that knowledge, right? What would you look for? And I'll start with Artist on this one, and then we'll go Red and Alex.
Yeah, I think it's just what I said. I don't even think it's what you look for. I think that people do have really good information. There's so many channels. I think the podcast, like I said, I think the podcast version of this where we can actually discuss it is what separates it a bit from someone who just has a YouTube channel. Because questions can come up, like where we can actively discuss it. But I think that you can watch anyone's video about any topic, and it's just considering whether it makes sense. And that's it. I think there's a bunch of people who have good ideas, and there's a bunch of people who have bad ideas, and I think that that mental observation of does this make sense for me? Like that video I watched, where the guy was like, "You only need one magazine. I don't need other shit. What am I gonna do?" I'm shooting at people coming on my property. It's that doesn't make sense. Because I think contingencies are important, and that's something I've learned personally, and from a bunch of information I've gathered. And it's like that you build upon yourself. You can watch a video with the worst, and I think this is what I mean. You can watch a video where the guy is the worst take in the world, as long as you're understanding or considering, thinking through their take, and you're like, that's what I shouldn't do. I think it's valuable, even if they're wrong, even if their opinion is bad, they have a bad take. I think understanding what you shouldn't do is just as important as learning what you should do.
Absolutely, yeah. Red on that.
I think the first thing you need to do is nail down what is it that I need? What am I trying to learn? What am I going to be using this for? Because it's like researching the answer for a question on a test. If you don't know what the question is, how the hell are you going to know where to find the answer? So you gotta figure out what it is you're trying to do, and then from there, you have to treat it the same way you treat the media nowadays. You're not just going to watch one source and be like, "Oh, okay, cool, that's what's happening." You're going to go around. And I've never been one to get attached to these YouTube people. I couldn't tell you who half of them are. You just go around in the area of which you're trying to get the information of. So say you're trying to learn about rifles. There's no reason you need to be watching some video of some SF guy talking about this build for this thing. Start small. Build on your knowledge. You have to have a foundation. Figure out what it is you're needing. Go to all sorts of sources, kind of like what Artist was saying. Figure out what works for you, and then use it yourself. You could go to damn near any gun range in America, and they'll have guns that you can rent. So if you're thinking about buying a rifle, get your ass to the range. $100 later, you have just shot the rifle you were thinking about buying. Did it work for you? Did it not work for you? Just go off of that. Don't take anyone's word for gospel. They don't know you. They don't know what you're trying to do. And it's a personal thing. There's stuff that works for everyone, but some things are pick and poke. What works for me, what works for them, and yeah, just build a foundation, go from there.
I liked what he said. I liked what
Absolutely. Alex?
Yeah, so it basically goes back to what I was saying earlier. I would invite you to revisit just the whole topic of extraction. So extracting exactly what you need from multiple sources. For real world experience, I've trained with SWAT teams, I've trained with partner force, I've trained with military, I've trained with civilians that have just been competition shooting or whatever it may be, and I'm able to extract from 4+ different avenues of information. So, and I'm able to take what works for me and in my application and use that moving forward. So, kind of, it goes hand in hand with what the other two said. Just, multiple source information and taking what you need. So what it boils down to.
Don't be stubborn. It's okay to be wrong, especially if you're just starting out. You're going to buy shit that's not going to work. You're going to buy the wrong thing. You're going to do the wrong thing. You're going to say the wrong thing. That's fine. That's part of the learning process, is being wrong and learning from it. But if you're wrong and you double down just so you're not feeling like an idiot, congratulations, you're twice an idiot.
Yeah. Well, and the overall thing, like, I'll keep it short. You know, survivability is the number one. Like, that's what we're seeking. So all these guys that are like, this is the only way. Good luck if you don't do it my way. Well, if you're the customer or the trainee and your goal is survivability, you are your only concern, or whatever you're trying to protect. Don't worry about anyone else is telling you need to be worried about. So just keep that in mind when you're selecting information to pull from. Don't let people sway you. Don't let emotion get involved. Your survivability is your number one priority, and take that moving forward.
Thank you for watching Part 1 of the Civilian Principles podcast. Part 2 will be up July 9th at 5 p.m. Pacific Standard.